Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton here with you right here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. We got a great show teed up here today. We're going to be talking with a couple of been there, done that business leaders on a wonderful and timely topic, right? Top 6 ways to optimize your warehouse. Now, folks, are you struggling with production in your warehouse operations? Is it getting tougher and tougher to fulfill orders on time and in full? Heard that one or a million times, huh? Trying to keep up with an ever-increasing service expectations out there. Well, if any of that sounds familiar or a lot more challenges, you're in the right place as we share how supply chain leaders are addressing those challenges and many more in this current challenging landscape for sure. So stay tuned for an informative, enlightening, entertaining, but most importantly, actionable conversation. So want to introduce our guests here today, starting with Morgan Anderson, CEO of Americas with SPARQ360. Morgan, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Wonderful. Great to see you. Really enjoyed our warm-up conversation already. And you've brought dear friends, your colleague Corey Tyler, Head of Operations Americas, also with SPARQ360. Corey, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
You bet. You bet. Y'all have been on the move. And I should point out on the front end, that is Spark with a Q, SPARQ360. So we'll make sure folks know how to learn more as we get into our conversation. But before we get into our top 6 list and we address so many of the common and unique challenges that warehouse leaders are feeling out there, I want to get to know y'all a little bit better. And Morgan, our team tells me that after a successful career of chasing kids through a variety of soccer fields, that they have kind of grown up a little bit, and it gives you a chance to play some more golf. Is that right?
Playing more, yes.
And I also hear we got to keep our eyes on you because you're a sneaky good golfer. Is that right, Morgan?
Yeah, I think old age or experience sometimes helps. So, yeah.
Now, what part of the country have you really enjoyed? I think you're based in North Carolina. Is that right?
I am. I'm near Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, man. So you can play golf year-round in the Charlotte area, right?
Yes, we can.
Or in my case, you can play bad golf year-round in the Charlotte area or in the Atlanta area where we're based. But great to have you. I hope to get some golf tips when we get together, maybe for the next episode.
Right. Sure.
Now, if the game of golf isn't challenging enough, Morgan, Corey, our team tells me there that you spend, when you're not doing big things in supply chain, you spend a lot of time up in your family's lake house where you're doing this, slalom water skiing. That sounds very that wears me out just saying it, Corey. Tell us more.
Yeah, it's a great sport. It's not for the weak at heart. It certainly takes a lot of strength and a lot of balance, and unfortunately, it's a fairly expensive sport. Could have picked a cheaper one, that's for sure. So, add the boat in, and it gets expensive. So
you beat me to it.
Yeah.
Anything involving boats, and especially fast boats, probably do require a few bucks. Is that right?
Yep, it does. I really got into it because we could do it as a family. So that's all of our kids, my wife, everybody water skis. So we all do it together.
Well, Corey and Morgan, it sounds like that's a common thread amongst the three of us. I've got 3 small ones as well. They're not as small as they used to be, but anything we can do together as a family, it's worth every dollar.
Absolutely.
So, Morgan and Corey, we look forward to getting pictures of your exploits on the golf courses and on the lakes. Maybe we can use the next episode. But we got a lot to get to here in today's conversation. So I appreciate y'all's time. Let's start with some context. Context is so important in this we're moving faster and faster by the hour, right? And I want to help folks, our listeners and our viewers, help them process the perspective that we're going to be sharing throughout today's conversation. So Morgan, if you would, 2-part question here as we start. Tell us briefly, if you would, about SPARQ360, and also as CEO, what's a couple of your favorite components of your role?
Well, SPARQ360 is a supply chain consulting firm, in the last few years, we've developed a growing sustainability solution as well. I know that the crux of this call is about supply chain. And it's really a group of former execs and high-ranking, competent folks from large shippers and 3PLs. And the beauty of people that work at 3PLs is you touch so many other clients and sectors, so highly experienced people. And what I like most about it is that we help people. Typically, we get the call when the warehouse is on fire, or we're not meeting the requirements, or, I have to do same day, pick, order, pack, ship. And that's when folks call us. And so we can bring in a team of folks to help, or we may talk more about it later. We're not getting the productivity out of our workforce. And so we use lean and some other tools and processes. So what I like is that we help people. And our tagline is that we care. We care about our folks, our associates, our employees. We care about our clients and our customers, and we care about the planet. So we care, and it's very evident when we work with folks that we bond with them and get really close and almost act like one of theirs. So
I love it. You basically are describing like a quintuple bottom line, and I love the passion you're bringing out. So what I'm hearing there is you basically have the A team in 2024 fashion. So I'm talking with Hannibal and B.A. Baracus right here on Supply Chain Now. I love it. And I know, a lot of folks may, when they hear that you love helping people, they may kind of, smile or smirk or roll their eyes, but spend a little time with you before the show started and kind of hearing your explanation there, I can tell it's very genuine, and it's a big part of the culture. And assembling a SWAT team of folks that have been there and done it, I can only imagine how you're helping organizations tackle old and new challenges, which brings me, Corey, to learning a little more about what you do. So if you would, a little two-parter question for you as well. Tell us what you do in your role each and every day, and what's one element of the culture at SPARQ360, the culture that Morgan's already kind of touched on, that really stands out to you, Corey?
Yeah, so what I do and what I love doing is not only helping the clients, but also helping our team members, right? Getting the right team members on the right job that are going to do an outstanding job for the client. And so Morgan and I bounce things around as we put people on the right accounts. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What are the skills they have? And let's match the two together. And from a culture point of view, I really love the culture here. We are no nonsense people. We have great conversations, and candidly, it is about helping not only our people on our teams, but the client especially. It's all about help. Let's solve the problem. And the great thing about it is we solve lots of people's problems and move on to the next one. And we're fortunate. We keep getting called back to help on the next problem. So it's been a fun years that I've been here and still enjoying it. So let's keep going.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So no nonsense. We are indeed talking B.A. Baracus. You just confirmed it, because he was a no nonsense type of character too. But kidding aside, I love, 2 points there that both of y'all kind of had elements in your responses. Number one, folks on organizations around the world, they, far and away, 99.999% want to be successful in what they do. And I think it's incumbent upon leadership inside the proverbial four walls and outside of those four walls to help remove the barriers, equip them with tools, empower them with ways to make better decisions faster so they can be successful. And that's where we all get a lot of fulfillment out of our days, right? And I love that. And another thing you kind of spoke on there, Corey, is not Band-Aids, root cause, getting down to root cause so we can put problems to bed, so we can move on to what's next in our teams and organizations kind of across the ecosystem. All right, so Morgan and Corey, man, y'all nailed that. Now, I really, hopefully our audience, much like I have, it's like I've known y'all for 10 years from your last responses to those questions. So, and you know what? The great thing is the best stuff's yet to come, because we're getting into today's theme for today's conversation, which is we all love checklists. Top 6 ways to optimize your warehouse. We're going to learn from Morgan and Corey here today and get a few stories from what it takes to make it happen out in industry. All right. So before we get into our top 6 list, a little more level setting, because I bet our audience members are going to really it's going to resonate when we talk about some of the challenges that warehouse leaders are dealing with, have been dealing with in recent months. As y'all share a couple of those things, I'm sure they're going to say, yep, I feel that one. I feel that one. Maybe next week, thankfully, but it's going to resonate with our audience out there. So Morgan, what are some of those challenges that you're seeing warehouse leaders deal with, here in recent months?
Well, the big one I think we all know is like the Amazon effect, right? Everyone wants everything, they want it now. So lead times are shorter. The discrete items, we're not shipping pallets now, we're shipping eaches and pieces. So there's sort of the e-commerce effect, if you will. And then of course, labor, it's been a real challenge. There's been inflation, some in wages, but just getting folks to work. COVID started that problem, and we're still struggling with labor. And I know we're going to talk a bit more about lean later, but that's where we think people or companies that can manage people and culture using a variety of tools, to me, are succeeding. The ones that can get the most, because I think this as well. You're only as good as the person picking that order. You're only as good as the person loading that truck, because they control the experience with your customers. And if they're not motivated, or, for whatever, if something's amiss, then it impacts your service. And so that's a real big piece. As we talked a little bit about culture, but culture at that level, right? Culture with the people doing the work.
Yeah, I love your response there. I'll tell you, culture and how we find ways to empower the workforce, and how we find ways to optimize and make lesser bad days and a whole bunch more successful days. Those are some of the many different ways that we can get around some of these really deep and persistent workforce challenges we have. Corey, flipping it over to you, what some of the challenges you're seeing warehouse leaders struggle with?
Well, Morgan kind of hit on it. One that's around still is, I call it the COVID hangover. We were bloated in inventory. Now they're trying to get rid of it. They were scrambling for space. Now they got too much space. So there's all kinds of problems that's come out of that COVID hangover. And it honestly showed how fragile supply chains really are. And so that's the good news side of it, that people are paying attention to it. And when people say supply chain now, everybody understands, where, 5-6 years ago, they didn't understand what it meant. So there's some good of it as well. That's right.
Whether we like it or not, we got the spotlight now. We got the spotlight. And
that's right.
And, you mentioned that COVID hangover. I think these last few years, we're going to be studying what took place and how organizations, how those that really were able to deliver what they did, as well as those that really struggled doing a lot of the wrong things, what they did. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be, hopefully, if we really pay attention, it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving. I know we're going to be talking about it for quite some time, as that monumental. But I love how both of y'all already put such a big emphasis on our people, because in this technological era, which is fascinating to live in, right? This golden era of supply chain, AI, you name it, it calls my attention more and more to the people within our organizations and how we can enable their and empower their success. So now we've got probably some universal challenges out there that resonate with folks. Let's get into our top 6 list. And Corey, I think we're going to start with you on the topic of assess and plan. Tell us more, Corey.
Yeah. So, as you said, what are the challenges? Somebody's not meeting their operational services. They're having a specific warehouse with operational issues. Typically we come in and do an assessment, and, we talk a lot about people, process, technology, and infrastructure. I typically warn people before we come in, we're going to ask a lot of questions. Please just get ready. We'll probably ask for a lot of data as well. And then we tend to benchmark that against other things in our experiences we've had, and do a gap analysis. It's not overly complex. It makes logical sense. That's why we do it, right? And so then we'll look at those warehouses, look at that gap analysis, and develop a plan or a roadmap of how we fix what we're seeing. We certainly get buy-in first, but then what's that roadmap look like, and what logically goes together? Which piece of the puzzle goes in first versus second versus third to get them to that end result, and try to lay out that timeline. It can be very long in some instances, or others. We've had situations where we've walked in and, do what we call rapid improvement and do it in a week and go away for a month and come back the next week and do it again and continue down that roadmap and walk them through from beginning to end quite quickly. You asked about a couple of stories. We've seen where companies have moved into a new building. An example is they just filled it from left to right. No rhyme or reason where they put product. It's just, I started on the left side and I just started filling and I moved all the way to the right. You can imagine what that does to the inside of a building as you're trying to fulfill orders. It's kind of interesting. You walk into other buildings where you just see dedicated shipping doors and dedicated receiving doors, and you start to ask why, and there's no automation in the building, there's no ask all these questions. You kind of you start to put the puzzle together of saying, hey, it doesn't make any sense that you have a dedicated shipping door when you have no automation feeding it, right? And you typically know that it's driving waste inside the building. And so, we'll get to it with lean, but we've all been trained in lean and we all understand what it means, and it's all about defining waste. And so that whole assessment really begins to walk them through that process of here's where you are, here's where you need to go, and here's how we'll help you get there by taking many pieces of the waste out.
Oh, I love it. And we're going to touch on waste here in a minute, but I want to add, Corey, I imagine as much as this has been a big part of what y'all do, your process and methodology at SPARQ360, I bet given all of your decades of practitioner experience, I bet it's been core to your approach that's made you successful. And to pull a couple of things out, which are universal key takeaways here, is going to the Gemba, talking with the people, asking the questions, disarming them, because the human nature is we get defensive when we get asked questions. But so it's all in the approach, and also not being disruptive. But that's how we get and have those powerful findings. And I think the other thing, and now we could spend a whole hour on this one response, but in my lifetime, when you get cross-functional people together, especially in one room, you start mapping out the operation and the exchanges from this functional area to this functional area. Those conversations, as counterintuitive as it should be, they don't happen enough. Right. And so all of a sudden you start having eureka moments, and gosh, the mountains you can move when as a collective team across the value stream of the organization, you identify massive opportunities. Oh gosh, it took me, as you described that, it took my brain back there, Corey.
Yeah. Well, I would just add too, getting to root cause. Sometimes people ask us to come in and they say, we're not meeting our on-time requirements. The customer is, the SLAs are, not there. And they think the problem is third shift, or they think the problem is, the number 4. And, the approach that Corey mentioned, as you said, getting to the Gemma, getting on the floor, talking to the people doing the work. There's lots of tools and questions and just experience to say, let's find the root cause, because sometimes the cause is not what people think. Sometimes it is. Sometimes people know what it is. And as Corey said, we help them prioritize that or build a roadmap. But it's really important, because if you're just attacking a symptom, right, instead of the root cause,
it's temporary.
You're not going to solve the problem.
It's temporary. You're going to be dealing with it again. And, going back to all those questions y'all both were referencing, it's more about the why and it's less about the who, right?
Exactly.
It's really important not to villainize as we put on our process improvement caps. Okay. Man, that's just the first one, that assess and plan. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate that. Let's go to the second one. We're talking about limiting our travel. Morgan, tell us more.
Yeah, there's 6 or 7 wastes in the world of lean, and one of them is travel. And I would say that's probably the most common problem that we see. We will do time studies and we'll evaluate folks and walk with them as they pick orders. And just the distance some of these products travel is stunning. Now, some folks do it real well, but we do a heat map, and we do a lot of analysis and help people understand it. I mean, Corey, one of them we were talking about the other day, some people say, well, our inbound doors are here and our outbound doors are there, and this is 1,000,000 square feet. Well, there's a lot of space in between the two. And it's like, well, why? Why do we have to do inbound on one side? And well, that's the way it always is, right? Or we want a flow, and I get flow, but and we all want flow, but you also need to look at the distance being traveled. And so why not receive in cross dock, right? Or why not receive and all your A items are near the pack stations? And so we find that to be the biggest culprit. Or as Corey said, they moved buildings and we started to the left, and there's really no rhyme or reason. I shouldn't say no rhyme or reason, but sometimes you question, well, why is this D item so close to the pack station or so close to the door? So that's what we typically see. I would say 70, 80% of the time when we enter, we find an opportunity to say, well, let's get a heat map and let's do some evaluations and let's reduce travel, handling these A movers, if you will. So I don't know, Corey, if you want to add anything to it, but that's typically what I see.
Well, Corey, before you do add, I want to add this quick blurb right before you get your perspective, because footsteps, travel has a lot of different definitions, right? Now, extra handling, extra processing, extra miles walked or driven or whatever. And, these days, I think we're all trying to get our steps in, right? I think 10,000 steps a day, right? But the thing is, we don't want our team members having to take those steps during the workday. Right. We want to make that really easy so they can get their steps in, in their time where they really enjoy those steps. But Corey, when it comes to limiting your travel, I think you've got an anecdote to share too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my past, have been around many operations, of course, both as a practitioner and work for SPARQ. But one of the situations was a true cross-dock company. They truly were a cross-dock company. That's what they did. And they started building new buildings. And we helped them define that the offices need to be right down the center of the building. And the reason we put the offices in the center of the building is, number one, it put the supervisors and managers out there on the gemma. They can see what's going on. Number two, it stopped the product from going across the building. It came in the door and it went out the door. So they couldn't go across the building to limit travel. So it was an interesting concept for a cross-dock company. And it took them a while to get around it, but now all their buildings are laid out that way.
Oh, that's really cool. Hey, organization by organization, there's some universal tools and best practices, you name it. But in many ways, every team, every business, every culture is different. And that's a really cool thing, I think, about what y'all do. Going into different companies, learning different leadership styles, learning different aspects of their service levels and expectations, you name it. All right. So we're talking about the top 6 list, or top 6 ways rather, to optimize your warehouse. We've gotten through the first one, which is assess and plan. We've gotten to the second one, limit your travel, which I really enjoyed the first two in particular, but especially that second one, because it's things we do just to get stuff done that we don't even know to what lengths we're doing it, that disrupts the rest of our day. The third one is the automation imperative that we're all living in. So Corey, tell us more about automation.
Yeah, automation is fantastic, right? We've all grown up with warehouses with automation and conveyor belts from here to kingdom come. Look at UPS, look at FedEx, whatever. The miles of conveyors, it works, right? But things are changing in the industry. The technology is changing. That automation is changing. The point I'd like to make is, before you get into automation, make sure you know what you're doing, make sure you know what the future looks like. And the one piece of characteristic that I see people not looking at is the order management. What's going on with our orders in the future? Help us understand what's coming, both from a volume and how the orders are organized. If you're going from large orders to individual eaches, if that change is coming, guess what? You need a different piece, right? Different piece of automation. And so that's what we see companies not understanding that future. But yet I've been in personal situations in past companies where it's just slammed down your throat. You're going to put automation in. You have to. In some instances, it doesn't work based on just your orders, your size, your complexity, And so making sure that you work through those questions to understand what's the automation that's going to support you is so critical before you invest that money. I would say the other thing is the newer automation is not as capital intensive. There's a lot of leases going on. There's, things that are happening without you having to do capital infrastructure because of the robotics that's coming down the road. So I've got a couple of situations that I've been in the past where, no kidding, the ASRS goes down, and it was never supposed to ever go down, but it's gonna go down. We all know that, right? And happened to be in healthcare, pharma, and it was only the largest facility in the country. And everybody's flying in.
Oh gosh.
I have no idea what we spent on the automation, but what was even crazier is what we spent on getting people in to be able to support when the automation went down. So being careful with that automation is so critical, so very critical, that you just have to, work your way through. Funny story is my boss was out there, the VP of supply chain. It was his turn to be on site. And we had a conference call open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were always on both ends of the phone, working through orders, working through whatever it took, right? That's what we do. And he comes in with a laugh and a smile. He goes, "Don't worry, we lost electricity here," and we're still on the phone. And he starts, about an hour later, he comes in the conference room and he goes, "Don't worry, there's a guy climbing the telephone pole out here. We're going to be up soon." Just the stories and the memories that you get with some of these crazy things you work through when, things don't go the way they're supposed to. And to me, when I got the topic of automation, I immediately thought of that story where, we got electric companies on the building and trying to figure out what's going on. So it was just hilarious. So now
supply chain, Corey, supply chain finds a way, right? Supply chain will find a way. And that kind of what that story reminds me of. And secondly, I want to go back to the first part of your response about automation. And Morgan, I'm happy to get your comment as well. But before you automate, what I heard Corey suggest to the audience is know thy operations and thy success as thyself. Yeah. And once you know all that, then it might be safer and more successful to automate. Morgan, anything you want to add to automation before I move to the next one?
You're spot on. Your comments were great. And, things like apparel, where you have size, color, gender, complexity, it's a no-brainer. There's some areas that don't need automation. And unfortunately, we've walked into situations where people have bolted, things to the floor and have a huge CapEx expense. And, they've almost automated waste, right? They haven't, I shouldn't say this applies all the time, but as you said, and as Corey said, make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure that it makes sense and have some assumptions that are conservative and not aggressive. And, that's been my experiences. It's needed, but it isn't needed everywhere. And to just recap, don't put all your eggs in that basket, because what happens when ASRS goes down, right? Certainly have a contingency plan or have some way that you can manually pick orders.
I can tell you what happens. You have helicopters on the land that you're now filling helicopters so they can keep hospitals alive. That's what happens.
Gosh.
So.
Well, health, to that point, Corey, healthcare supply chain doesn't get enough attention. We've done lots of intriguing, captivating stories because that's just a part of industry, I think, that doesn't get enough conversation. So, but one last point about automation that, Morgan, you were kind of alluding to, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. Folks, bring in the experts. That's where third parties, trusted advisors and third parties that have been in so many different organizations, been in so many different situations, that's when they can really bring value. And it goes back to what we said on the first one, asking questions. That selection process, as you go through the automation, it's so critically important. So,
and if I could add, make sure you have a neutral party. So someone that's not selling the equipment, right? Because, not taking shots at anyone, but some people want to sell these wonderful toys they have and machines, and sometimes it's needed and sometimes it's not.
That's
so
right.
you can certainly listen to the salespeople that are doing a wonderful job, but it's also great to have a neutral opinion to say, hey, from an engineering standpoint, does this make sense? And do we need, really the question is, do we need it?
Right.
Are you going to see a step change in your production? If the answer is, hey, we're going to get a 5 to 10%, that's one that I would think long and hard about.
Yes, those non-biased, trusted advisors, they are invaluable, especially with some of the big decisions and checks and potential consequences that comes with any of these decisions. Okay, assess and plan was the first. Limit your travel was the second. Automation, which is a big one, was a third. And then inventory is cool again, Morgan. So let's talk about inventory accuracy. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, and it's a blocking and tackling, right? It's a basic thing. Inventory accuracy, everyone knows how important it is. We're seeing more and more challenges with that, especially as things are being sped up, right? As we talked about the Amazon effect, or the effect rather, and the fact that there's such little time. And when you get to location X and the wrong products there or incorrect quantity, it's a big problem. And so we're seeing more and more focus on inventory accuracy. And really, back to some of the earlier things that we discussed, is having people execute the transactions. Corey can probably tell you a better story about a recent client, but people in the healthcare, in the pharma world, are not executing transactions fast enough. So think about if you're moving this stuff quickly, but someone wants to do the transaction after the fact, or an hour later, or tomorrow, it's a real problem. And so, to me, it's as basic, inventory accuracy, bill of material. There's some basics, right? And we're seeing that come under more strain, and we're seeing that cause more problems. So I would say have an active cycle counting process, right? You don't need to count everything every day. We have one experience where someone had 30 people cycle counting because they had to. They were coping with inaccuracies, if you will. So they almost had to count everything all the time. And so I'm not prescribing that, but you have your ABC, and just have an active cycle counting process, and use your technology and reinforce the fact that transactions need to happen in real time. So if you have a WMS and you're scanning, you're in good shape, but not everyone has that, right? Some people have these inventory systems and it requires manual work, and whatever it takes to keep that up to date, accurate, it's worth its weight in gold. So Corey, I think you had a good story on that from a recent experience.
Yeah. So, just an example of some challenges that are around inventory is we helped a customer with their transactions and getting their inventory more accurate, helped them set up a cycle count program, et cetera, et cetera. But they had a 3PL on the outside. And you asked the question, you cycle counting that? And candidly, no, we're doing a full physical once a year. And I'm like, why aren't we cycle counting? Why? Explain it to me, right? Ask the whys, let's get to the bottom. Find out that they were already almost done negotiating a new contract. And I just said, okay, let's add this in now and talk to the leaders of the 3PL. And they said, wow, yeah, absolutely. No problem. We're putting it in. And basically the cycle count program we put in with them is not ABC. It's let's start at X% of what you touched last week. We're going to cycle count it this week. I want to see if it's right. And if it's not right, we're going to cycle count more. And if it is right, we're going to cycle count less. And it's basically activity-based cycle accounting. And they absolutely loved it, both sides. And all of a sudden, they're starting to see results, right? And they're fixing their inventory while it's happening. So
love it. And to put a spike the football on this fourth item here, however you get there, you just got to get there with inventory accuracy, because it can cost the business and the organization tremendously. Okay, good stuff there. We got 2 to go. The fifth one on our list is managing partnerships across the ecosystem. Corey, tell us more.
As you know, there are lots of partners in the supply chain, right? And the further we go down, the less we control. And it's more partners and more partners. So your relationship with your partners is so critical inside of this. And so, the example of this last 3PL I just talked about, I mean, doing things like that just help the relationship and that partnership grow. they want to do the right job for you, but many times people don't spend the time, invest the time in that relationship with those partners. And, in my past lives, I literally had people who were relationship managers. That was their title on my team, just to make sure that those providers that are providing those services that is so essential to everything we do, that everything's in place. We know how things are going. We have the metrics in place. We have all of those things that go with that partnership. One example that we just ran into, somebody outsourced, their operations, outgrew their warehouse, outsourced their warehouse. This one happened to be in Europe, and it was the first time they'd ever done it. And they basically signed the contract and said, well, here you go. Systems are running. Everything's great. Here you go. And all of a sudden they're shocked. Like, why are we having operational issues? Why is that right? I mean, they thought they got through that hypercare, but they didn't. They didn't set up things. They didn't manage the relationship. They didn't have the KPIs in place to say things are going. They all felt it, but they didn't manage the relationship. So, in that example, we put one of our team members on site and just helped to make sure that we turned this around so that now they talk together instead of, sending emails that are snide and other things, and it took time, but not that much time, candidly, 90 days. And it was significantly different. And to be honest with everybody on this call, it wasn't the 3PL. It honestly was sitting on the shipper side. They basically washed their hands of it and walked away. Well, the 3PL needs support to operate.
Huge missed opportunity if you're having these conversations once a year, to your earlier anecdote. And, those that are really wanting to invest in a relationship and really encourage that idea and data exchange both ways, the ideas that come out of those types of relationships can be very, very powerful. Morgan, anything to add on?
Well, you're exactly right. There needs to be frequent conversations, but I would say the other thing is to get the objectives and goals aligned. They shouldn't be, on-time delivery would be a negative for someone else.
Right.
It's a joint on-time delivery. Sometimes I see that the way that Corey mentioned the contracts, that the contracts are structured in a draconian way, or there's penalties. And I get it. Yeah, you may need penalties, but it's better to have common goals, right? And if you do X, Y, and Z, there's incentives for you to, get more business, or to, the way I say it, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but it's like a marriage, right? You're not holding hands. You're not going to the prom, right? When you engage a 3PL, you're getting married for 3 years or 5 years or whatever. And so, you've got to work things out. You've got to talk to each other. You have to have common goals. And sometimes I see in the procurement cycles or in the sales cycle that there's inconsistencies, at least the way that the deals are structured. If you see that, it's always a good exercise to go in and try to figure out, how do we make this win-win? Yeah. How do we have common goals and share?
Yeah, and I would just add, if I may, Scott, we took that engagement and started to look at some of their other providers. And of course, as we looked into the other ones, they happened to be more expensive and so forth. And so we helped them in many ways, getting their relationships and their service providers together, but by building those partnerships. But we also gave them a giant ROI, like 8 or 9 times. So
tell us more about that, right, Corey. So we love talking ROI around here. What was that?
So, a lot of times, we deal in the warehouse, but there's a lot of expenses on the transportation side, and it's all interrelated. And in this example, we started digging into the service providers that were supporting the 3PL, the warehouse that was there, and started looking at contracts and looking at service levels. And because we did this on the warehouse side, so the next evolution was let's go to the transportation side. So happened to be complex transportation and so forth, but candidly, that's where the ROI is larger in many instances, depending on the situation. But in this one, we spent a year with them, and not only, I call it playing with house money, then we turned an ROI, and now we're playing with house money, and we help them with many other things that had nothing to do with these situations because of the ROI that was returned.
And we're talking about a 9x ROI.
Yes.
If I've got that right. Is that right?
Yes.
Man, okay. That dog will hunt, as they say here in Georgia.
All day.
What other important note? All day. That's right. Morgan, I think it was you that mentioned the penalties, and for many of our audience members out there, they'll know this because they're the smartest audience in all of global supply chain. But, for example, retailers, they don't want the penalty dollars. They've got to use it in some cases. They want the performance. And if you go to them and you know how you're measured and you have those conversations and you figure out how to crack that code so you're avoiding all those penalties, oh gosh, the ways you can grow your business based on how you can deliver, right? Oh man, big opportunities. Okay. So the sixth one, I thought the sixth one would be the best one, but man, y'all got me really ready to run through the wall behind me with these first five. I think all three of us are very passionate and kindred spirits around the power of lean. So Morgan, tell us about how that factors into warehouse optimization.
Yeah, I will. At a macro level, I think sometimes people lump lean with Six Sigma, and Six Sigma is a good thing. It's a big umbrella, and a lot of it's focused on process, right? So if you're building an airplane or an automobile, or you're making big vats of shampoo, and there's complexity, I think Six Sigma is the right tool there. Lean is not really a subset of Six Sigma technically, but I'll say that it is because we have the mic. But lean is focused on waste, eliminating waste, and there's 6 or 7 wastes: travel, dwell time, overproduction. I'm sure we all know them. And to me, it's common sense, and many warehouses aren't as complicated as building an airplane, right? So there's less complexity. It's common sense. And the beauty of it that I've seen through experience is that people understand it. So you could explain a Kaizen or a value stream map to someone on the floor and they get it. The other beauty of lean is that you mentioned the word gimbal, right? You're on the floor. That's where the value is being created. And you can see silly things like, why is this pallet traveling this distance? Or why are we doing this? Or why is this being put over there? And typically we find that the people doing the work have the best answers, have the best input. And, just to further develop this is when you ask them and say, we want to make your job easier. We want more production. We want, less waste. They're usually open and encouraged to share. It makes their job more rewarding. So we think of like the pyramid, if you will. We like to flip the pyramid upside down and put the people doing the work that are seeing the waste in a position to share that and work with us and find ways to improve the overall operation. And in its advanced phases, and I'll pause here, I'll let you catch my breath, but it really becomes the glue. It really becomes such a cultural thing. It's like a language that everyone speaks. And so anyone that runs large warehouses with lots of labor, you may have 30% or 50% of your workers are there all the time. They're employees, but you may augment that seasonally with temporary workers, right? And so how do you quickly get them up to speed, right? And what we see is when you bring these folks in and they see the shadow boards, or they see the status at a glance, or they see some of the lean tools, it's very quick. It's intuitive, right? We love to set up these boards to say, are we winning? Or are we losing? So everyone can walk by that particular area and say, we're ahead or we're behind.
Yeah.
And everybody can figure it out. And then you don't need a supervisor to say, Joe, go pick that box. Joe can see that, right? So in the advanced phases of lean, we see very high performance warehouses. We see very high morale, production, better, less damage, on time, the whole deal. All the metrics in advanced levels of lean, we've seen multiple times to be very, very productive. So I'm sorry I'm on my soapbox, but I thought I would try to get all that out before we get too deep in this.
It's an important soapbox. I'm a massive proponent of seeing lean impact organizations in so many different ways, most importantly by empowering people. And, going to your point about all the waste, I think when I first actively studied and practiced lean, I think we were on those 7 wastes. I've seen 8, 9, 14 waste, new definitions. But most importantly, regardless of what count you use, to your point, Morgan, is when you train the team and you bake into the culture that ability to see waste in all of its various forms, you can move tremendous mountains, from that over processing to defects to non-utilization of talent, the waiting, all of that good stuff. When the whole team can see it, oh gosh, the ideas and more importantly, the actions, the solutions and the outcomes can be overwhelming. Corey, I bet my hunch is you want to make a quick comment on lean before we move on.
If I may. I mean, and it's so interesting when you walk into these buildings and you get the culture and so forth, and you come back maybe a year later and you see the difference in the empowerment of the people on the floor. It just, it makes you smile. It opens your heart up. This is why we do it. It is absolutely about the people, and they do get empowered. The ones that are good at it do get empowered, and it's candidly, it's amazing.
And just a comment about benchmarking. If you were to take the top 10 leading 3PLs that focus heavily on warehouse, almost every one of them has a heavy lean program.
That's right.
Right. I don't know if you want to name the names. We all know who they are, but they do this for a reason.
Right.
And because it works. And so if you're benchmarking out there and you say, oh, I don't believe in lean, or Six Sigma, it's too fancy, lean works in a warehouse. It flat out does. And even if you just do part of it, you're going to get some benefit.
That's right. And so check it out. Don't sleep on lean. Don't buy into some of the inaccurate narratives that have been out there for not just during the pandemic and after the pandemic, but for decades, if we're being honest. And one last thing for some of our listeners out there that may have been caught up in a reduction in force or, other really negative consequential thing, and they hear it under a lean flag, folks, that's not lean. That can be an excuse and a scapegoat. But when done right, lean unlocks tremendous new opportunities for the team and the organization, I believe. Okay, as much as I hate to move on, we've covered our top 6 lists here. We could have an episode on each one of these. So just to run right back through these, number 1, assess and plan. Number 2, limit your travel. Number 3, automation. It's fascinating to see what's going on there these days. Number 4, inventory accuracy. No matter how you get there, you just get there. Number 5, manage and pour into those partnerships. And number 6, lean, folks. Yeah, what's old is new again. Don't sleep on it. There's exciting new ways folks are applying that with tremendous impact to their organizations. Okay, speaking of what's old is new again, a lot has changed when it comes to modern warehouse management, but a lot has really stayed the same. So I want to ask both of y'all, Morgan, I'll start with you. What's one thing that has changed when it comes to the mindset that supply chain leaders got to embrace when it comes especially to optimizing warehouse management?
I think you just have to be open-minded, right? Because things are changing, as we've discussed, the Amazon effect, the labor, and you just have to be open-minded. And we talked about travel and heat maps. Just because we always put 4 over here doesn't mean that it has to be there, because the environment's changing, the requirements are changing, the labor's changing, technology's changing. And I just think you need to be open-minded. There are some tried and true ways that things need to be done, but, be open-minded. And I think that's where lean comes in as well, right? Continuous improvement. How do we get better today than we were yesterday?
That's right. That's right. All right. So Morgan, I love that. Being open-minded, critically important today, being able to ask and answer questions with that open mindset, where I like to use a lot, the power of positive mutual assumptions. I think that and open-mindedness go along hand in hand. Corey, what about you? When it comes to one thing that may have changed when it comes to the mindset of supply chain leaders looking to really get new warehouse results, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit around it earlier, but it's around the automation and how automation has changed. And opening eyes to what automation is and what is out there and what's capable. The technology is changing immensely. And I'll give an example that we've ran into a warehouse where, robot is basically cycle counting 1 million square foot building in a day. And you just scratch your head and you're going, how are you doing
in a day?
In a day. So those are things that are out there that you have to stay up with, that the leaders have to stay up with some of that technology and understanding what's changing and what's going on. If you ask somebody 10 years ago, would you have a drone flying in your warehouse doing your cycle counts? And they go, whoa, no way. guess what? They're all over the place, right? So those are the things
That's
that
right.
need to be, not all of it fits for all customers, right? It's what fits for you. So that open-minded of
Yep.
that technology and automation that is out there is pretty important as we go down the road.
Love it, Corey, leaning into that uncomfort zone in so many different ways, especially as leaders, where you may tend to shy away from the latest buzzword or trend or whatever, but goodness gracious, it's time to investigate with due diligence. And to your point, everything is not a fit for every organization, especially as it relates to technology. It's amazing what the new use cases I see just about every hour. All right. I love this next topic I want to ask you all about as we start to come down the home stretch. I love how y'all are investing in new research that's coming out. And I think y'all have been working on a new relationship with our friends at Appalachian State University, App State back in my day, ASU up in, I think in Boone, North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, Morgan.
That's correct.
So the research is focused on the future of supply chain and logistics. And in many ways, the future is here already. I think the research is coming out August 12th. So Morgan, two-part question here. Can you tell us any early key takeaways you can kind of let the cat out of the bag? If not, that's okay. And then secondly, how can folks access the research?
Yeah, so some of what we see, this is future looking, if you will. So AI is, of course, a big topic. Sustainability is a big topic. And so, those things were woven throughout this. We're still working on the study. We're finishing up some of the analysis, but some real good learning, some very interesting perspective. And we're real just thrilled. The folks at Appalachian State have been wonderful. And so it's sort of a, university and business partnership, if you will, and we couldn't be happier. So as you said, we're releasing it on August the 12th. We may come back and spend some more time on it at a later time with you guys on this. And so you can reach it at our website. It's SPARQ360. So that's SPARQ, not the K, 360, SPARQ360.com. And sign up and let us know. And when it's released, we'll make sure that that the study is sent to you.
Awesome. It's just that easy. August 12th is when it's being released, and we have confirmed we've booked it through the rock and roll agents over at SPARQ360. We're going to have the team back August 20th for a live stream as we dive into the report and all the critical lessons learned and takeaways. So y'all mark your calendars for that. And SPARQ360 with a Q, not a K. If you want to learn more and download your own copy, SPARQ360, the numerals.com. Okay. So, y'all been on the move, Morgan and Corey. Hopefully y'all have got some clones out there, given all the work you are doing that can maybe get it done when you also get some rest at night. So SPARQ360, be it warehouse performance improvement, greater supply chain optimization, sustainability solutions, where y'all have won some awards here this year, you name it. Morgan, as we start to wrap here, if you would just really quickly tell us what kinds of companies call on SPARQ360 to get help on things, and why are they calling you?
We have lots of these stories because unlike a lot of traditional consulting firms, our company is built on people with hands-on experience, on-the-ground experience. We worked at 3PLs. We talk supply chain because we've lived supply chain and we've experienced it.
That's a massive differentiator. I think all of us out there, I know I have, I don't want necessarily the consultants that tell me what I need to do. I need folks that jump in, have lived it, and can help me do it, right? And I imagine that's one of the big ways that you're able to hit those massive ROIs. Like I think Corey mentioned that 9X ROI earlier. Yes, that dog will certainly hunt. Hey, Morgan, let's make sure. I'm going to ask Corey the same question here in a second. Morgan, how can folks connect with you?
Well, they can go to our website and connect there, or folks can email me. It's morgan.anderson@spark360.com, or LinkedIn works. So any of that's fine. But our website's wonderful. You can go there and we can connect with you there.
It's just that easy. Spark360.com, and that Spark is with the Q, not the K. Corey, same question. When you're not in facilities, or when you're not slalom skiing, or keeping an eye on Morgan's golf game, how can folks connect with you, Corey?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Go to the website, or I'm on LinkedIn regularly. My email address is corey.tyler@spark360.com, and it's corey.tyler@spark360.com. Happy to help however we can.
It's just that easy. And that's I'm glad you added that last blurb in there because we should close the loop. I'll tell you, Morgan and Corey's passion come through this discussion we're having here today. And when we started, they love doing what they do because they love helping folks, and that's kind of where we're ending it. And I'll tell you, they're helping folks in some powerful ways, leveraging their collective immense experience there. So big thanks to our guests, Morgan Anderson, CEO of Americas with SPARQ360. Morgan, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You
It's
bet.
been great.
Corey Tyler, Head of Operations Americas with SPARQ360. Thanks for being here, Corey.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate your time.
You bet. And we're going to get some golf and some slalom skiing tips maybe on the next episode. But hey, folks, kidding aside, join us again on August 20th as we dive in deeper into the future of supply chain logistics research that SPARQ360 is producing with our friends at Appalachian State University. But most importantly, connect with our esteemed panel here today. Check out SPARQ360.com for more information. And you got to take one thing that Morgan and Corey, and they put out a lot out there, a lot of actionable advice and insights. Take one thing, put it in action. Your teams are ready to do better and change the game, right? It's all about deeds, not words. So with all that said, on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton challenging you, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.